Next stop, hell. The rumble of the freight train shook the ground as it slowly rolled through the run-down factory town. 5 teenagers, looking for an adrenaline rush, raced along the tracks towards the moving cargo cars. "We have to time this perfectly," Jake shouted over the din of the locomotive. He was the reckless ringleader of their little group. As the last car went by, Jake grabbed the handle and swung himself up, boots clanging on the metal steps. The others followed suit, piling into the dimly lit boxcar. Their laughs and whoops of joy echoed against the steel walls as the town fell away behind them. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Erin asked, grinning from ear to ear, the biggest risk-taker among the girls. Miles of decrepit factories, empty warehouses and trash-strewn lots rolled past the open door of the boxcar. Riding the rails had been a dream since they were little kids, an illicit teenage rite of passage. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Jake popped open a bottle of whiskey he had swiped from his dad's liquor cabinet. They passed it around, feeling rebellious and unstoppable. The train rolled on, leaving the decaying town far behind. Surrounded by barren fields and scraggly trees, the 5 friends felt free and alive, despite the cramped, musty boxcar. Sometime later, the train's brakes shrieked and groaned as it slowed to a stop in the middle of nowhere. Jake stuck his head out to look around, but there wasn't a town or even a house in sight, just empty fields stretching towards the horizon. What the hell? He turned back inside, puzzled. Why would the train stop out here? A cold wind suddenly howled, lifting trash and debris in spiraling funnels. The friends huddled together against the unnatural gale. Hail and freezing rain pelted the boxcar with stinging force. "Something's not right here," Erin said through chattering teeth, wrapping her arms around herself. In the distance, a haunting moan cut through the whipping wind, a chorus of anguished souls rising in volume. They froze, straining to locate the source of the eerie cries. Bony white figures emerged from the fields, thousands of them shuffling through the blustering storm towards the train tracks where the boxcar sat. Their gaunt frames were naked and filthy, eyes sunken into hollow sockets. The pitiful, tormented masses surrounded the train like a river of suffering. "Oh my God!" One of the boys recoiled in horror, covering his mouth. The haunting moans grew unbearably loud, ringing in their ears. Jake slammed the boxcar door shut to block out the nightmarish scene. Terror gripped them all as the train unexpectedly lurched back into motion, leaving the wailing mass of wraiths behind in the gloom. They huddled in shocked silence, jumping at every creak of the boxcar. When daylight peeked through cracks in the walls, Jake cracked open the door. Dry, cracked mud plains greeted them, along with searing blasts of hot wind. A vast, hollow wasteland stretched in all directions under a sickly green sky. Rocky outcroppings thrust up from the parched earth, and brackish rivers of bubbling sludge cut through the desolation. "Where the hell are we?" someone whispered. They watched in revulsion as fat, disgusting creatures wallowed in the putrid rivers, gorging themselves on the foul sludge. They moaned tunelessly, their bloated bodies glazed with ooze and filth. The jarring stop-start of the train hurled them against the walls repeatedly. Bursts of flames swept across the plain, accompanied by a thunderous booming that shook the entire train violently. Ash and smoke swirled in the scorching air, blotting out the poisoned sky. By the time the train reached its next stop, they had grown numb to the nightmares unfolding around them. This time, hulking figures stalked the shadowy plain, naked and muscular with the hairy hindquarters of goats or horses. The inhuman brutes dragged other wretched souls behind them with chains and whips, lashing out viciously at any attempt to flee or resist. Anguished screams split the air as the larger beasts savagely beat and violated the helpless captives. "This can't be real," someone whimpered from the shadows of the boxcar. Unwilling to watch the depravities any longer, Jake sealed the door as the train started moving again. They huddled in the darkness, listening to the horrible cries eventually fade into the distance. No one spoke as the miles rolled by. All-consuming dread had seeped into their bones, a certainty that they were being inexorably drawn to someplace evil beyond comprehension. When the next stop came, thick black rain poured from the skies, sizzling as it struck the scorched ground. Lightning arced across twisted iron towers that loomed in hellish silhouette against the dark clouds. The teens pressed against the back wall of the boxcar, terrified of what lay outside. Mangled, burnt corpses littered the barren landscape around the iron fortresses. High-pitched shrieks of agony echoed through the constant booming of thunder and rumbling of the black storm. Deep below, even more chilling cries resonated from underground caverns and channels flowing with rivers of boiling blood and scorching fire. Despite their silent pleas, the train eventually ground to a halt once more. An eerie, sickly pale light bathed the dead, rocky crags surrounding them. Moans and choked sobs drifted on the stale air. Gathering his courage, Jake crept to the door and peered out, squinting. A vast, empty desert stretched out under a dim, featureless sky. The colourless plain writhed with thousands upon thousands of anguished souls, flailing in never-ending despair. There was no ground or structure, just a dense, interwoven mass of naked suffering stretching to the horizons. He recoiled, slamming the door on the horrific sight. Stifled weeping rose from the others in the darkness of their metal prison. Eventually, the mournful cries faded as the train began moving again. But they could never forget the haunting sights and sounds burned into their memories. The constant swaying of the boxcar spoke of endless miles devouring as the whiskey ran out and hunger pangs set in. Yet they dared not leave to scavenge for food or water, not after the nightmares they had witnessed. So they sat in tense, thirsty silence awaiting the next hellish stop. When the brakes finally screeched again, the stench of rotting flesh engulfed them in thick, cloying waves of putrefaction. They gagged and retched, tears streaming down their clammy faces. Even the smallest intake of the rancid air brought bouts of vomiting. Venturing a look outside revealed a sprawling, oozing bog or swamp of tangled, contorted corpses in varying stages of decay, all sinking into the viscous mire. The lifeless forms churned in an endless, macabre cycle, bodies dropping endlessly into the sickening sludge to be slowly devoured and regurgitated, only for the grisly process to begin again. Some darker impulse compelled them to watch the repeating cycle of degradation and destruction. They could not look away as the innocent and the damned alike were consumed by the gruesome cesspool, screaming in terror as the fetid waters closed over their heads again and again. At last, the sounds of the torture drowned out by the unstoppable flow of the apocalyptic quagmire. Only then did the train finally wrench itself back into motion with an ungodly groan. The teens had gone beyond screaming, beyond weeping. Only a hollow numbness remained inside, an emptiness echoing the endless miles of desolation between each progressively more horrific destination. Panting, drained of energy and willpower, they could only huddle near the door as the next stop arrived. A charred, featureless plain shimmered in waves of scorching heat. The ground itself seemed to burn and smoulder in glowing streaks and drifting clouds of ash. Hulking, molten behemoths strode across the fiery expanse with thunderous footsteps. The cycloptic titans raged against each other, ripping into their stony hides with razored claws and crushing fists. Each fell only to rise again, fully restored and even more furious. Another stop brought a whirling maelstrom of shredding winds, pulling and tearing at anything caught in its grasp. Doomed souls trapped within screeched and wailed as the howling gale ripped their very essence apart, over and over in an endless loop of suffering. The horrors mounted with each stop, layering on deeper shades of despair. There was no respite, no sanctuary to be found, only escalating realms of torment at the heart of the world's dark oblivion. They stopped speaking, stopped feeling, stopped rationalizing the sequence of nightmares parading endlessly outside. The rumbling drone and clanging of the tracks became their only tether to any sense of reality, until at last, the next stop brought the shattering of that final lifeline. As the train ground to its latest halt, an unnatural silence pressed in upon them, a deafening void where no sound could penetrate. The stale air hung thick and dead, untouched by even the slightest whisper of wind. Dread flooded their hollow forms as Jake slid open the door. There, stretching out before them, loomed the gaping maw of nothingness itself. An infinite, all-consuming pit of purest oblivion yawned obscenely across the horizons of non-existence. There was no ground, no sky, only a bottomless chasm pulling them inexorably inward with the force of a million black holes. The void's gravity dragged at their beings as if clawing to uncreate them. Jake's mind reeled, unable to process the sheer obliteration of all reality that the abyss represented. His fragile sanity teetered on the edge as his soul recoiled in cosmic terror. He wrenched the door shut, pulling the others away from sheer oblivion. They shook uncontrollably, trapped between the ravaging void without and the plunging depths within, fathomless expanses of utter desolation, emptiness and entropy. When the train finally lurched back into motion, shuddering against the pull of the pit, they could barely breathe. Their minds had come undone, scattered to the realms of unreality like tumblers in an unravelled kaleidoscope. Only shells, husks of the bright souls who once raced to catch that fateful train. Jake's mouth worked soundlessly as he tried to speak, to call out, to reach the friends he could no longer recognize. Nothing but void stared back at him from their shattered gazes. No words or images could penetrate that all-consuming negation of being. Somehow, the hollow numbness still found new depths as the train's brakes shrieked again, the final shreds of their former existence fully unravelling. This time, there was no exterior visible beyond the open boxcar door. Only a featureless, lifeless grey that consumed all light and colour, an infinite, eternal plane of null essence, devoid of hope. Their beings, already torn asunder, wavered at the precipice of total disintegration. What little individuality remained bled away into the nullity beyond that threshold, until nothing was left but concept divorced from perception or meaning. And still, the train stopped, final dissolution postponed by some darkly capricious deity or cosmic curse. For an eternity, the hollow shades lingered in never-ending checkmate, longing for total obliteration, yet suspended on that razor wire between existence and the void. Until at last, the seething malice of that interminable torment burst its confines with one final excruciating stop, condemning the remnants of their tattered souls to the sundering revelation awaiting in the next unworld. As the door grated open, they gazed out upon a realm of such profane, all-encompassing evil that the very fires of hell themselves would be rebuffed by its fulminations. An eldritch dimension of putrescent, sentient abyss actively conspiring to annihilate not just the material, but the immaterial, every quark and quanta of existence in its all-devouring grasp. Formless, lurking ultra-beings radiated from that hellfire cosmic anti-matrix, their perverted inverse geometries clawing at the fabric of reality. Unspeakable shades of anti-light scorched the unknowable visage of the terminal plane, devouring sanity with but a single glimpse of its ontological unravelling. And there, adrift within that Gnostic apocalypse, awash in the final tides of undoing, they caught their last tremulous, scattered motes of perception coalescing one ultimate, annihilating pattern seared into the shrieking cosmic antiflow. As the voids between voids peeled away to reveal the ultimate nighted genesis invert, the undreamed truth proclaimed itself in soul-shattering finality. This is the omnimalis. And with that, the last vestiges of coherent identity, the ultimate sparks of humanity's grace, the dream of becoming, of being, all was subsumed into the terminal rampancy of "this is the omnimalis," rendered at last to null particle iota and unbecome.